"Nothing." "I think," said Mr. Chester, in the same easy tone, and smiling twice or thrice to try if the patch adhered, "I think there was something else. I have heard a trifle of jewellery spoken of, a mere trifle, a thing of such little value indeed that you may have forgotten it. Do you remember anything of the kind? Such as a bracelet, now, for instance?" Hugh, with a muttered oath, thrust his hand into his breast, and drawing the bracelet forth, wrapped in a scrap of hay, was about to lay it on the table likewise, when his patron stopped his hand and bade him put it up again. "You took that for yourself, my excellent friend," he said, "and may keep it. I am neither a thief nor a receiver. Don't show it to me. You had better hide it again, and lose no time. Don't let me see where you put it either," he added, turning away his head. "You're not a receiver," said Hugh bluntly, despite the increasing awe in which he held him. "What do you call that, master?" striking the letter with his heavy hand. "I call that quite another thing," said Mr. Chester coolly. "I shall prove it presently, as you will see. You are thirsty, I suppose?" Hugh drew his sleeve across his lips and gruffly answered yes. "Step to that closet and bring me a bottle you will see there, and a glass." He obeyed. His patron followed him with his eyes, and when his back was turned, smiled as he had never done when he stood beside the mirror. On his return he filled the glass and bade him drink. That dram dispatched, he poured him out another, and another. "How many can you bear?" he said, filling the glass again. "As many as you like to give me. Pour on, fill high, a bumper with a bead in the middle. Give me enough of this," he added, as he tossed it down his hairy throat, "and I'll do murder if you ask me." "As I don't mean to ask you, and you might possibly do it without being invited if you went on much further," said Mr. Chester with great composure, "we will stop, if agreeable to you, my good friend, at the next glass. You were drinking before you came here." "I always am when I can get it," cried Hugh boisterously, waving the empty glass above his head and throwing himself into a rude dancing attitude. "I always am. Why not? Ha ha ha! What's so good to me as this? Whatever has been? What else has kept away the cold on bitter nights, and driven hunger off in starving times? What else has given me the strength and courage of a man, when men would have left me to die a puny child? I should never have had a man's heart but for this. I should have died in a ditch. Where's he who, when I was a weak and sickly wretch, with trembling legs and fading sight, bade me cheer up as this did? I never knew him, not I. I drink to the drink, master. Ha ha ha!" "You are an exceedingly cheerful young man," said Mr. Chester, putting on his cravat with great deliberation, and slightly moving his head from side to side to settle his chin in its proper place. "Quite a boon companion." "Do you see this hand, master?" said Hugh, "and this arm?" baring the brawny limb to the elbow. "It was once mere skin and bone, and would have been dust in some poor churchyard by this time, but for the drink." "You may cover it," said Mr. Chester. "It's sufficiently real in your sleeve." "I should never have been spirited up to take a kiss from the proud little beauty, master, but for the drink," cried Hugh. "Ha ha ha! It was a good one, as sweet as honeysuckle, I warrant you. I thank the drink for it." "I'll drink to the drink again, master. Fill me one more, come, one more." "You are such a promising fellow," said his patron, putting on his waistcoat with great nicety, and taking no heed of this request, "that I must caution you against having too many impulses from the drink and getting hung before your time. What's your age?" "I don't know." "At any rate," said Mr. Chester, "you are young enough to escape what I may call a natural death for some years to come. How can you trust yourself in my hands on so short an acquaintance, with a halter round your neck? What a confiding nature yours must be!" Hugh fell back a pace or two, and surveyed him with a look of mingled terror, indignation, and surprise. Regarding himself in the glass with the same complacency as before, and speaking as smoothly as if he were discussing some pleasant chit-chat of the town, his patron went on. "Robbery on the King's highway, my young friend, is a very dangerous and ticklish occupation. It is pleasant, I have no doubt, while it lasts; but, like many other pleasures in this transitory world, it seldom lasts long, and really, if in the ingenuousness of youth you open your heart so readily on the subject, I am afraid your career will be an extremely short one." "How's this?" said Hugh. "What do you talk of, master? Who was it set me on?" "Who?" said Mr. Chester, wheeling sharply round and looking full at him for the first time. "I didn't hear you. Who was it?" Hugh faltered, and muttered something which was not audible. "Who was it? I am curious to know," said Mr. Chester, with surpassing affability. "Some rustic beauty, perhaps? But be cautious, my good friend. They are not always to be trusted. Do take my advice now, and be careful of yourself." With these words he turned to the glass again, and went on with his toilette. Hugh would have answered him that he, the questioner himself, had set him on, but the words stuck in his throat. The consummate art with which his patron had led him to this point, and managed the whole conversation, perfectly baffled him. He did not doubt that if he had made the retort which was on his lips when Mr. Chester turned round and questioned him so keenly, he would straightway have given him into custody and had him dragged before a justice with the stolen property upon him, in which case it was as certain he would have been hung as it was that he had been born. The ascendancy which it was the purpose of the man of the world to establish over this savage instrument was gained from that time. Hugh's submission was complete. He dreaded him beyond description, and felt that accident and artifice had spun a web about him which at a touch from such a master hand as his would bind him to the gallows. With these thoughts passing through his mind, and yet wondering at the very same time how he who came there rioting in the confidence of this man, as he thought, should be so soon and so thoroughly subdued, Hugh stood cowering before him, regarding him uneasily from time to time while he finished dressing. When he had done so he took up the letter, broke the seal, and throwing himself back in his chair read it leisurely through. Very neatly worded, upon my life! Quite a woman's letter, full of what people call tenderness and disinterestedness and heart and all that sort of thing. As he spoke he twisted it up, and glancing lazily round at Hugh as though he would say, "You see this?" held it in the flame of the candle. When it was in a full blaze he tossed it into the grate, and there it smouldered away. "It was directed to my son," he said, turning to Hugh, "and you did quite right to bring it here. I opened it on my own responsibility, and you see what I have done with it. Take this for your trouble." Hugh stepped forward to receive the piece of money he held out to him. As he put it in his hand he added, "If you should happen to find anything else of this sort, or to pick up any kind of information you may think I would like to have, bring it here, will you, my good fellow?" This was said with a smile which implied, or Hugh thought it did, "Fail to do so at your peril." He answered that he would. "And don't," said his patron, with an air of the very kindest patronage, "don't be at all downcast or uneasy respecting that little rashness we have been speaking of. Your neck is as safe in my hands, my good fellow, as though a baby's fingers clasped it, I assure you. Take another glass. You are quieter now." Hugh accepted it from his hand, and looking stealthily at his smiling face, drank the contents in silence. "Don't you—don't you drink to the drink any more?" said Mr. Chester in his most winning manner. "To you, sir," was the sullen answer, with something approaching to a bow. "I drink to you." "Thank you. God bless you. By the by, what is your name, my good soul? You are called Hugh, I know, of course. Your other name?" "I have no other name." "A very strange fellow. Do you mean that you never knew one, or that you don't choose to tell it? Which?" "I'd tell it if I could," said Hugh quickly. "I can't. I have been always called Hugh, nothing more. I never knew, nor saw, nor thought about a father, and I was a boy of 6—that's not very old—when they hung my mother up at Tyburn for a couple of thousand men to stare at. They might have let her live, she was poor enough." "How very sad!" exclaimed his patron with a condescending smile. "I have no doubt she was an exceedingly fine woman." "You see that dog of mine?" said Hugh abruptly. "Faithful, I dare say," rejoined his patron, looking at him through his glass. "And immensely clever? Virtuous and gifted animals, whether man or beast, always are so very hideous." "Such a dog as that, and one of the same breed, was the only living thing except me that howled that day," said Hugh. "Out of the 2,000 odd, there was a larger crowd for its being a woman. The dog and I alone had any pity. If he'd have been a man he'd have been glad to be quit of her, for she had been forced to keep him lean and half starved; but being a dog and not having a man's sense, he was sorry." It was dull of